Hi, Tony from All the Remote Things here again today. And today I've got the fantastic pleasure of talking with Niko Skievaski. I got it. There we go. Skievaski from Redox. How are you today, Niko?
I'm great. How are you?
Fantastic. I'm really happy to have you on because we're going to do some really good chatting about remote workplaces. But before we do that, would you like to introduce yourself to the viewers?
Sure, absolutely. So my name's Niko. I'm the co-founder and president of Redox. I live in Boulder, Colorado, and Redox is a fully remote company. We've been doing it since 2014. We like to say since before it was cool, and we have about 230 employees now. And everyone is fully remote. They live wherever they want domestically within the United States. And that means we have people in about 38 states these days. And we are a healthcare technology company. So we move data around between health systems and software applications in the cloud primarily. And so we make the healthcare data that's being used by doctors and nurses a little more useful by giving it to the applications that will enable workflows like telehealth and remote patient monitoring and analytics and diagnostics and all those sorts of things. So
That's brilliant. And the reason I was really keen to get you on, well, there's two reasons. Firstly, I love what you're doing with the health system, so we will talk about that because the viewers all know that my partner, she's long-term nurse, and so it's dear to my heart. And then the second thing is, you said it's fully remote, and you've been doing it since before it was cool. So that was a great. I could have asked that for better. So let's talk about that. So it truly wasn't cool, that period of time when you brought that in. I came from that kind of remote and distributed used to be the word, right? Or offshore,
hmm
all those terrible words before it became cool to be known as remote or remote
yeah.
hybrid. How did it come about?
Yeah, so me and my co-founders, we all met working at our prior employer. And so we were local, we worked together in person. And then the first three people we hired, we raised an angel round of investment and we hired three people and we knew exactly who we wanted to hire. And they didn't live where we were. So we started the company in Madison, Wisconsin, and these people lived all over the US. And so we had the three founders in Madison, and then we had three employees kind of scattered about. And the reason why we wanted to hire them is because we had known these people in the past. We had worked with them before. They had a very specialized skill set to accomplish what we were trying to do. And we knew that they were passionate about the problem, that they wanted to solve it, with the same level of passion that we did, and therefore they actually made big sacrifices and worked for a very small paycheck at the beginning, and got equity in return, right? So they got some of that upside, and so it was almost out of necessity that we were like, these are the people who we want, and so it's going to be remote. And really from then, so our three founders, me and Luke and James is our CTO. We really didn't even see James much anymore in person because he was working with these developers that we had hired elsewhere. So yeah, it kind of right from when we hired our first employees, we were remote, and we very quickly saw that if we created an in-person culture and they were on the outside of that, it didn't feel like they were included. And so we tried really hard from the beginning to say, yeah, there's some of us here in Madison, but but this isn't headquarters. Like, we don't have a headquarters. This is a remote team. And as we grew the team, we kept doing that. And so we made simple rules like no conference rooms. Everyone's on Zoom, or I think at the time we were using Hangouts.
Yeah, I was going
But
to ask that. Yes.
yeah, which I feel like has made a renaissance these days. But
Yeah.
so we, tried to kind of level the playing field and make it work for people remotely. I remember our investors were always a bit skeptical about it. They were like, "Oh, you're remote. That's interesting. Like, how? Well, it looks like it's working so far. We'll see how it goes. Like, let's keep on top of it." And yeah, it just never became a problem. And then now it actually was an advantage for a lot of years in our hiring because we were able to hire people who didn't want to live in really costly cities. They wanted to get out of San Francisco or New York or Boston, and move somewhere nice like in the mountains or on the beach. And yeah, and they were looking for that remote work, so we were actually able to hire talent and differentiate based on that. But nowadays that differentiator is kind of gone. So it's mostly like we just say, well, we've done it longer and we know how to do it more effectively. And in a lot of cases that turns out to be why people enjoy working in our remote culture than people who are trying to figure it out right now and kind of going through those growing pains.
Yeah, no, I think that's an interesting. You said the differentiator's gone, but I think that's not quite right from my assessment of it. Is because I obviously see a lot of it. The differentiator is that you've been doing it for quite some time and you're mature in what you do.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people are still trying to work it out, which is why I was interested to have you on. Learn lessons for everyone. So let's just dig a little bit deeper into how it actually works. Right? So firstly, maybe it's how it worked and how it works now. So you had some challenges in that gap there. Technology was one I was going to ask you about because Zoom was really not quite there that kind of period of time. It was more Hangouts and Skype and things, right?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
we used Hangouts. We've always used Slack. That's always been a central player in our tech stack. I feel like especially in those early days, it was like every couple months we would adopt a new tool to try it out and figure out what worked. But yeah, like what I think one of the things that made it work for us that I feel bad about companies these days is that we started remote. We have always been remote, and have never had an office environment or people who are trying to work out a hybrid environment. Like being fully remote is, I think, an advantage in that. And because our culture came from that world, like the way that we work and the way that we document things and work together, it's sort of in the DNA of the company, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it just kind of comes naturally to us compared to people who might be trying to figure it out. And so when we hire people from who had been working in an in-person environment, they can kind of assimilate quicker to the way that we do things because it's not people kind of bring them along faster because they they understand when someone when they see someone not quite getting like the things that we do to work in a certain way. Yeah, but I think you're spot on in that, we still definitely have a differentiator in that we have done remote so long that we tend to do it in a way that's quite effective. We bring people together in person a couple times a year. So we actually we call it remote first, but we do require people travel to come together. And I think that's really important because we bring the whole team together about once a year for a big team retreat. It used to be like we would all hang out at one person's house, and now it's like we rent out like a resort in a small town somewhere. Yeah, but so it's the production of that's kind of increased. But what we try to do at these retreats is really focus on building relationships and trust with each other and having fun and playing and brainstorming and being creative, making music. And we do a lot of karaoke is a big part of our culture. So, things like that where you're kind of being vulnerable in front of each other, dancing. And it's not like we force people to do that, but within these environments, those things kind of emerge. And the reason why we focus on that so much is that we know that when we get remote again, we're going to be basically like chipping away at that trust bank that we had earned up. And so if me and you get to know each other really well and we have fun together and we play games and we dance and we party, and then when we get back on Zoom and I ask you like, hey, did you have that report that I asked for? Like you give me a little more it's not there's no resentment that builds up and things like that. And so I think it's important to get together every so often to kind of build up the trust bank. And then during the working environment, when you're slacking people and you can't really tell people's emotional state or intentions behind it, you can give people more of a benefit of the doubt because you know them as a human being.
Yeah, that's interesting. So I like that because we talk about that a lot in remote AF. And again, you touch my favorite thing, hybrid. I don't like that word, but we obviously deal with it. But however, as far as I'm concerned, when I'm talking to people, if you've got anybody who's not in the room and you're dealing with them, then you're all remote, and that's how.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Just my little stepping ladder. Everybody knows that.
Yeah, I agree. I agree 100%.
The other thing I want to touch on was your communication mechanisms. I guess is what's the cadence of that? Is it very synchronous, asynchronous? Do you have specifics? It's always of an interest to me how companies do that because obviously those that are testing out the remote sort of frame or have just been thrown into it, we've seen that across the world, that it's just become meeting overload.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're trying to replicate everything they did in physical, and everything has to be in a meeting. So I'm interested, for people to hear how you deal with that.
Yeah. And I would be lying to say that we don't struggle with meeting overload. I think it's a chronic problem on everyone's calendars. But what I think we do really well is work within documents. So we use Google Docs, and most decisions that are made or proposals or communications end up in a document. And we have a culture of heavy commenting and going through comments. And oftentimes what we do in a meeting is we'll post a document the week before, and everyone's job is to go in and review it. And then the meeting is about talking about having the discussion about largely what's in the comments. And we'll go through the comments one by one and be like, hey, Tony, you said this about this line. Like, what do you think about that? Can you share more? And have a discussion about that. So we try to use the live conversation for really like talking to each other rather than someone lecturing or giving a presentation. So yeah, and we also do we do enterprise sales, right? We sell to health systems and software vendors and payers, and so our sales team and our customer support team, they're in meetings back to back every day, like with customers on the phone. We try to use documentation in a similar way with them, but I think it's kind of required in a lot of those cases to build up that sales and support environment.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing that we talk about is don't be afraid to have that async mechanisms, because it's a necessity.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. Now, what I wanted to pick a little bit further, I heard you talking about it, you were touching on it. So let's talk about the cultural type of mechanisms that you have in place as well. You talked about bringing everybody together and creating that culture, but just talk to me about the culture that you've created and continue to create and evolving.
Yeah. So just in general, I think in a remote environment, we have to talk about culture a lot more than you might in an in-person environment. And that's just because what we're missing in a remote environment is the impromptu interactions that may happen between people. We don't have a physical place where you can kind of walk in and feel what the container of that environment is, because our container is virtual, right? We don't have a wall with our values plastered on it where everyone sees it all the time. So we actually use meetings, and we use rituals within those meetings to reinforce the culture all the time. And we think about culture at the same level we think about our mission and our strategy. I almost think about like our mission is why we're here, and our strategy is what we're doing, and our culture is how we're going about doing it. It's how we treat each other. It's how we treat our customers. It's how we show up in the world. And we all have a part to play in it. And so it's not just like me as a founder saying, this is our culture. It's me putting intention into that. But in every interaction, like me and you right now talking, we have a culture within this meeting. And I bring 50% of that, and you bring the other 50%. And so we all have a responsibility to impact the cultures that in every interaction that we're part of. And we take that really seriously. So we actually we have 3 values as a company. We have identified behaviors that are associated with those values, and then those behaviors are evaluated on someone's performance evaluations when we do performance evaluation. So 50% of someone's performance is based on, did you get your job done? And then the other 50% is how did you get your job done? And that's really the cultural questions. And so we take it really seriously, and we measure people's effectiveness in creating the culture that we want. Yeah, and then within meetings and we talk about like why we're here frequently, about the impact that we have in healthcare is a big piece of it. We try to pull stories out of our own employees, as far as like a lot of people have personal stories. You mentioned your partner is a nurse, right? Like a lot of people have personal stories where they interface with the healthcare system either as a patient or as as loved ones as patients, or those sorts of things. So we try to pull those stories out to really ground ourselves in the purpose. We bring our customers into meetings frequently to do Ask Me Anything sort of sessions. We do panels with our customers, and to really like focus on like the customer focus in our culture. And we we have little sort of rituals and traditions in meetings that just kind of bring a sense of identity to people. I think having a shared identity is so important to create a sense of belonging and a great culture. And so we do a lot of things to try to do that. If you got a job at Redox, before you even start, you get a box in the mail that's just like full of Redox swag. You get a T-shirt, you get I don't know, you get all sorts of stuff. You get like a sweatband with our logo on it, and so in a meeting with Redox, it's like 50% of the team is wearing Redox swag, and like that's a little thing, but it's like a sense of identity that builds. And we change our T-shirts all the time, so there's like, if you have the same T-shirt as someone, you know you started about the same time, and so there's like little things like that. People trade shirts. Yeah, and then in meetings, we start every meeting by setting the intention for the meeting and our purpose, and then we actually meditate together. So we call it a moment of Zen. It's like 2 to 3 minutes. Someone leads through a guided meditation, or sometimes it's a getting in your body somehow. And then at the end of the meeting, we end with a one clap where everyone where we put our hands up and we clap to finish the meeting, like adjourned. So yeah, like it's little things like that, but when you work at Redox, those are the types of things that define the identity of what it's like to work here. And in a remote setting, I should say in an in-person setting, there might be things that are implicit, like, oh, we go to this bar on Thursdays, right? Like, and that's not part of the written down anywhere, but that's just like part of the the rhythm of the office. And so in a remote setting, I think you have to kind of be more explicit about those sorts of traditions and rituals that can help define the identity of what it means to work at your company.
I love that you're, leader first, so we talk about culture, and culture just doesn't happen. Leaders need to go first, right? That always is the culture. Obviously, culture builds around lots of different things, but implicitly, there's that understanding that the leaders do lead the culture. And I like that you're talking about the fact that you're always addressing it. There's something I want to touch on that you do also, which is cultural, but also part of the way you work. And a lot of organizations don't do this. So when we were all thrown into this remote and everybody started to embrace this remote, employees went home and they worked on benches, tables, whatever that, or it became a permanent thing. But at this moment in time, a lot of organizations have not embraced it. And what I see as importantly is that they're actually taking the cost out of their pocket rather than their employees' pocket. And what I mean by that is that you actually provide a stipend to your employees to set up their offices. Talk a little bit about it, because we were talking about that off air, and I think what you do is really fantastic.
Yeah. So we call it the productivity fund. And actually, we have 2 stipends that we give to employees. It's annual; every single year you get it. So you get a $500 productivity fund, and the intention around that is to buy things that will help you be more productive. So that's buy a monitor, buy a camera, buy headphones. I feel like every January the whole team gets new headphones, but get speakers, whatever. So. And we actually don't even audit it. Like we don't have a list of approved things. We just let people buy whatever they want. It's $500. It doesn't matter all that much. If you want to buy a bicycle so you can go out and feel happy and healthy, like do it. Which actually kind of brings us to our second fund, because we realized we wanted people to feel happy and healthy and get outside and do things that bring them wellness. And so we created another fund a few years later called the Wellness Fund. So for the past probably 5 years, we've had both of these. So we have another $500 for a wellness fund. So and really it's like every employee just gets $1,000 a year to buy things that will help them either be more productive or happier and healthier. And yeah, it's fun. We have a Slack channel where people put it's called like Productivity Fund Inspiration, and people will like be like, hey, who got the best monitor that travels well? And then people will post what they got and talk about it, or who got the best headphones. And yeah, so it's sort of been a fun part of the culture, is like you start working here and you're like, oh wow, I got $1,000. What am I going to buy? And so you can go on there and look and see, what are the favorite standing desks or stools or chairs or all sorts of things like that. But I think it's important to feel like you have a good place to work and um, and can be productive in. So whether that means outfitting an office or getting really nice headphones so you can block out the world, we want to invest in that.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic because to me, part of this move to sustainable remote, I mean, let's face it, this is not going away. We all know that. And if that's going to be the case, part of that sustainability is that organizations shouldn't expect their employees and to be making a profit off of their employees and having to shell out of their own pockets, right? So
Yeah.
I think that's a fantastic thing that you're doing. There are a few other organizations.
The way that we had justified it at the beginning was since we didn't have an office, we said, well, everyone's having an office at home, so we're basically saving. Even if we give everyone $1,000 a year, we're still saving money on having an office building and an office manager and someone to water the plants and pick up the trash and stuff. So it's I think you still come out ahead, and people get a nice desk.
Yeah, and if you're watching this and you're an employer, take note because this is an organization that's doing it well. So we've talked a lot about when everything goes well. Obviously, there are some things that haven't worked for you, and I'm interested to hear that. And I'm sure everybody's interested here because everybody goes, oh, well, it's all shiny and remote, but obviously you've been through a journey over that period of time. What are some of those things that didn't quite hit the mark or that you've had to adjust to?
Yeah, I think that there's a few things. One of them was, especially early on, we had a really hard time hiring kind of more junior employees, people who were coming right out of college, or especially like junior programmers, because it is harder to see if someone's struggling or doesn't really know what they should be working on, or really like work at someone's elbow and kind of mentor them and train them. So we tried at the beginning. We tried hiring some more junior people, and like it wasn't working out, and not their fault. Like we just didn't have the infrastructure and capacity to actually like bring someone on and train them up appropriately. Yeah, and so that took us a while to learn. Nowadays, past the 200 mark, I think we have a lot more infrastructure about like how to onboard people well, how to train them. Each team kind of has their own team specific training that they put people through. And so we've gotten a little better at that. But I think just in general, it's harder to have junior employees be remote. And I can remember, coming right out of college, and working in a work environment, like I felt really held by an in-person work environment. I knew where to go, I knew where to be like at a certain time, and it was pretty much like if I was there and I didn't know what to do, I could pick my head up and ask someone really easily, and felt really supported. I made friends at lunch and all of that, and so it felt like a structure that was really good for learning. And yeah, I think that was more difficult in a remote environment. Nowadays, as we're getting bigger, we went from a world in the very early days where most of the team were sort of generalists, kind of getting stuff done at a quick pace. Nowadays, we have a lot of specialists, right? We have teams of specialists who are working on very specific things that depend on other teams for. And so the challenges that we're going through now are more around cross team collaboration. And yeah, so a lot of people on the team, they might only know the 5 people they work with really well. Like the 5 people on their team, but not understand like when they complete that work and throw it over the fence, it's going to a new team who has to do something else with it. And so making sure people understand where they fit in the overall machine of making work, and how that work impacts others, and then when we run into projects, which happen frequently, where we have to actually get people from 5 different teams to collaborate together on something new, and those 5 people don't know each other that well. They don't necessarily know the world that they're coming from. That's been difficult, and I don't know if that's specific to a remote environment, but I know it's something that we struggle with, that we're actively working on trying to get better at. Both from how as leaders can we help that, but how can we also help the employees all just understand and have more empathy for each other and get to know the rest of the organization more. so that they can work more effectively when it comes to collaborating across different functions.
Yeah, we here at Remote AF, obviously that's how we're connected as well. Obviously, because we have that thought about the collaborative connective tissues of the organization and how you get that information to flow horizontally and vertically and plug it in.
Yeah.
Those systems of all hands planning and those types of mechanisms as well. We're not really here to talk about that, but that we see that that mesh as you start to grow. So it's really great that you brought that up for us. Look, I think it's fantastic of you to share that stuff with us. But I think it's also inherent on us to talk about Redox itself, or what you actually do. You talked about how you take the information and you make it more transparent and usable. Explain to me how that actually makes the healthcare system better, because I'm really interested. I read a little bit of your philosophy, but I think it'd be important for other people to hear.
Yeah. And when we started Redox, the healthcare system in the US was adopting electronic medical records. So they were digitizing what doctors used to write on literal clipboards on paper. They were putting that into computers. And when I say they, the US government subsidized the adoption of these technologies. And what happened was all the health systems in the country and providers adopted electronic medical record systems that were enterprise software systems that literally sat in a database in the basement of their health system that was managed by their own team. It was never designed to talk to the internet. And that became a problem so we had this sort of first wave. This was kind of like 2010-ish to 2014 maybe, or maybe a little earlier than that too, but where we adopted electronic health records in this country. And then once we had those in place, so instead, doctors are now typing into computers, talking with patients, and that data is streamlining billing, stuff like that. But now that it's digitized, there was so much opportunity to actually use that data to make the health systems more efficient, to understand what types of patients might need different types of care, to optimize the whole system, right? That's kind of, that's the holy grail. The dream of the digitization of data is that we can, use it to make us more efficient. But because of the types of systems that were adopted, it was difficult for entrepreneurs or software developers who are coming up with ideas to actually use that data in any reasonable way. Because if I was working with a health system in order to get access to their data, I'd have to literally either be on premise within their data center or VPN into it. And then when I got the data was largely formatted differently at one health system versus another. And there was no way to talk to many health systems at once. You had to kind of go into each one by one and do that. And so that became a huge barrier to entry for new innovation and technology in the space. And so what we were seeing was, there's great technology being invented that was used at one health system, but it wouldn't be able to be proliferated across many health systems. So what we decided to do was build a middle layer where we said, okay, if someone's building a new application in the cloud, which is, where most new software is being developed, they want an API that they can talk to. And so we built an API, and then really what Redox does is we connect that API to all of the health systems. Well, we're up to around 3,000 health systems in the country. So the vast majority of health systems are connected to it. And so now a software developer can build against our APIs and then interact with the health systems that they're working with. And, a clear example of this was in telehealth. Before the pandemic, we were at 5 to 10% adoption of telehealth. In the pandemic, that went up sky high. Now it's back down, to a reasonable level. Around 25% of healthcare is happening over telehealth these days. And the reason why that telehealth software needs to talk to the doctors is because a doctor might be seeing one patient in person, and then the next patient they might be seeing over video, and they need to kind of understand where these patients are. And so it needs to all sync up with their calendar appropriately. The doctor's calendar is within their electronic medical record, as well as the patient's charts. But the software to actually do telehealth, like Zoom, for instance, Zoom's one of our customers, that is in the cloud. And so we need to sync that up, much like Zoom syncs up with your calendar. Like, we're the API, so Zoom can sync up with electronic health records. Because, with calendars, it's like you're on Google or Outlook or maybe something else, but there's not that many. With electronic health records, every single healthcare provider, every logo of a health system basically has a different thing. So we're the sort of standardizing body across all of those, and make it possible for digital health to kind of work on top of that.
So what really piqued my interest, because in the medical industry, immediacy, consistency, and clarity of the information they're getting is what you're aiming at providing. So
Yeah.
you're there, you get the same experience as you go there. Would I be?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a that is why I mentioned before, like why we focus so much on the purpose and impact of our work, because we see on average around 15 to 20 million patient records go through our system every single day. And what we're doing with that data is we're translating it and we're moving it somewhere else. And if we translate it incorrectly, or if it gets stuck, or if it goes to the wrong place, there's literally lives on the line. And so we need to understand the gravity of the work that we do, and that is huge when it comes to our culture, because understanding that gravity when we're making decisions about should we do X or Y, or how fast are we going to implement something, or what risks are we willing to take, we have to take into account that there's literally patient lives on the line, that if we mess something up, or if our system goes down, there'll be technology across the country that is not working, and providers who will be sitting across from a patient, potentially in an exam or in a procedure or surgery, that suddenly don't have the technology they need to carry forward. Or telehealth calls will just stop. Like they won't be able to log in. They won't be able to launch the call, right? When you try to go into a Zoom meeting and it doesn't work, and you end up late and on the phone, right? Like it's situations like that we don't want happening in healthcare. And so it's a good reminder to think about how at some point we are all a patient at some point. We're all going to interact with the medical system. And I hope that when I am in the hospital, for whatever reason that might be, that everything's working smoothly, and the providers have all of the data that they need, and they have all the tools that they need to take care of me. And so, yeah, we think about that a lot.
And I love that, because here we often I talk to organisations a lot over my career about plugging their strategic intent into their delivery, and their delivery to their strategic intent. And exactly what you're talking about doing there. Everybody understands what your strategic intent and the gravity of it. So I applaud that. Look, Niko, we're very close to the end of our time, and it's been fantastic to have you on here today. If somebody wanted to get in touch with you, or they wanted to work for Redox, I was saying Redox. I know that's my Australian accent, Redox. So I apologize to everybody who's watching this. What's he saying? How do people get in touch with you?
Yeah, for sure. So our website is redoxengine.com. The engine's like the data engine, our product. And on there you can find all sorts of information about us. And I think LinkedIn's a great way to stay up to date with what we're doing, or contact me on LinkedIn. And I'm pretty easy to find with a name like mine. So yeah, reach out. Happy to have conversations. And also one thing that I started recently that for your listeners might be interesting is I started a podcast just talking about culture in a remote setting. So kind of, even getting down to a more niche sort of audience than you're looking at. But so we have a podcast that is specifically devoted to how do you actually create a great thriving culture in a remote world. So we're only 7 episodes in, so it's pretty early. But yeah, it's been really fun. So if you want to check that out, it's called The People Everywhere Show, because people are everywhere. And you can find that on the website, peopleeverywhereshow.com, or anywhere you get podcasts.
And you'll find that in the show notes and the liners as well. So we'll make sure that gets out as well. That's fantastic. We really are at the end of our time. If you're watching this, please like, subscribe, so we can keep this thing going. Join our Remote AF community, where we've got a lot of remote-minded people. You just go to remoteaf.co, click the community button, join us. There's lots of conversations in there, much like these, and many of the people that you see on these casts are actually in that community. It's been a fantastic pleasure to have you on, Niko. I hope that everything with Redox goes fantastically well. I'd love to hear how your journey goes. Thanks again for being on all the remote things.
Yeah, thank you. Have a good one.